Alrighty. There's Liz. Liz is there. Now let me bring in Finn as well. So how do we get that camera angle? Come this way a bit. Let's just maybe have you. Well, mate, this is going to be cozy. It's like the coziest ever interview.
Nice.
Welcome to Live from LaunchPad, ladies and gentlemen. This is officially the coziest interview we've ever done. I mean, Liz, I feel like we're missing out on your company here. We've got enough room in the broadcasting booth, but there we go. So, for those who are tuning in who haven't read the blurb, I am joined today for what I'm calling episode 6 of Live from Launchpad by Finn and Liz from the Good Robot Company. Hello, guys. Now, in my introduction, I said that probably you guys are the saviors of the world. And I don't think it's like overstating it to suggest that, because what you are working on, like, genuinely could be the difference between me and my children being able to like grow our vegetables in the garden and some kind of drone coming and like shooting me for growing vegetables that don't align with an AI's philosophy, right? So this is human species mission critical stuff that you're working on. But rather than me kind of try to, badly, hyperbolisly, is that a word? I feel like it could be now.
We'll go with it.
Explain what you do. Do you want to kind of introduce yourselves and let folks know a bit about what you're up to with the Good Robot Company?
So I'm Finn. So I'm one of the co-founders, and I think what George is saying is right. So we're working on our real mission with the company is to create ethical artificial intelligence. We're currently working on some really cutting-edge bias detection software, which we're rolling out to some customers, working on some research projects, and that's sort of what we're up to at the moment. Elizabeth, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, hopefully my mic's working. Thank you very much for letting me join in remotely today. I'm Elizabeth. I'm the technical co-founder of the Good Robot Company. So I'm there with like the 7 different screens, like trying to recreate the Matrix. No, but really it was a really good technical journey so far in developing Good Robots software. And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this session.
Nice. So, I mean, I don't want to kind of, again, overplay it. And I also don't want you to reveal like your Coca-Cola secret sauce. But from the sounds of it, if you could create, the kind of ethical, like the bias detection algorithms that genuinely worked, like that's incredible. So without maybe giving away too much, because it does seem like the hope from everything that I've read and understood about AI at the moment, seems to be the holy grail, is can we get something that is genuinely ethical and unbiased, right? So how have you been approaching that? Later on in the conversation, we're going to talk about neurodivergence because that's like a massive area of fascination. And I think that not only are you doing amazing work in the kind of robotic space and AI space, I think there's something about how you've structured the organization that could be equally game-changing that I'd love to get into. But initially, give us, so Liz, you've got your screens there, and Finn, by the sounds of it, you're kind of the spokesperson who's like, like you've got this wonderful kind of, I mean, I'm jealous, dude. My voice is normally pretty strong, and yours is like outshining me to the max. So let me know about how you've been approaching the thought process of even tackling this problem.
Maybe I'll start with the product on this one.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, let's do that.
So when we first came up with sort of the idea behind GoodRot, making AI ethical, ethicality, of course, is an extremely encompassing thing. I mean, and it's also very subjective. We went to an event yesterday where Alan Winfield was talking through the standards behind AI ethicality, and there isn't a really defined standard that is international, and we're creating this technology that has impact on people's lives, and much like the way data is used, they're not always aware of how that their sort of personal lives are impacted by this AI, either through bias or ethicality. So one sort of segment we thought of, well, if we can at least analyze bias and detect bias in AI, then that provides value not only to the organization making that AI, but also the consumers, because they understand where there is bias in that system. And it's one step towards the ethicality journey. We're very we have a roadmap to support how we can understand the complexities behind this AI increasingly. But in terms of our approach, it was research, having a program that has a layered approach to detecting bias and then providing solutions to that bias, and then supporting that all with having sort of the democratization around AI understanding and putting out podcasts, putting out educational resources, being able to communicate why bias can create unethical outcomes in this way.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth raises a really good point there, and it is like fundamental to what we're working on here. Ethicality in itself is a huge issue. Like there are 180 frameworks that have been outlined for ethicality in artificial intelligence. So for us to come forward and say we're creating ethical AI is like a really big thing. I mean, what is ethical? What is ethical to you won't be ethical to me. If you ask someone, are you ethical? Like pretty much everyone will say yes, or they certainly won't say no, right? So that's like a whole thing. What is ethicality? But fundamentally, we're working towards a technology that is going to prevent, exactly as you said, the big mission, right? We're creating super advanced artificial intelligence. We're creating the supercars of the Bugatti Veyrons of artificial intelligence, and we haven't even invented the steering wheel yet. And that is scary. That is really scary, right? And I think people don't really get this until they start really exploring it, and suddenly they're like, oh my god, like this is, we're creating so my dissertation, how this started, was all about algorithmic strategic decision making, how AI, machine learning, can run companies. And it's happening. They are running sort of parts of companies, and they are such big problems. We don't understand them. Like artificial neural networks, by their very nature, are unexplainable. They aren't transparent, right? Lambda, the really famous Google program recently, has 1 trillion parameters. 1 trillion parameters. A human can never even comprehend that kind of thing, right? And we had the whole thing recently where this Google engineer turned around and he said, this has the sentience of a 5-year-old. And then everyone's turned around and go, it hasn't. But everyone's like, oh, well, who knows? Like, that's so exciting. It's so complex. It's so hard to understand. So what we're really doing is like, this is a huge thing we're going towards, and it's a big mission. So we're working on a partnership with some big organizations, which I can't quite say, like, wish I could, with some hopefully some Innovate UK funding to work on the really like next level, never been done before, ethical artificial intelligence sort of program system. At the moment, we're working on this bias detection software, which I think is really exciting, because actually it's changing the way companies are being run. It's increasing their efficiency. It's it's improving their operations and reducing the bias in their AI. So big problem, but that's how we're approaching it.
And you bring up some really interesting pieces there, which is like, as you speak, the kind of phrase that comes to me is like, we can't put Pandora back in the box right now. Like the fact that we have this AI that has got these like 1 trillion parameters or whatever. The fact that if I, from what I read, BlackRock, of course, which is one of the ultimate kind of financial asset management companies on the planet, has got this AI Aladdin, which basically like is running like funds with a kind of a GDP greater than like 3 or 4 different massive countries combined, from like, I can't remember off the top of my head. So like Pandora's left the box a long time ago. Now, like the challenge, like you said, it's not just, I really love your metaphor, because as someone who like loves powerful communication, to be able to distill this massive thing, like 180 different parameters, and no one probably would agree on all of them. But I get the sense it's not just that we've been designing this self-driving supercar. We're trying to retrofit the steering wheel whilst it's driving down the motorway, probably. So what I hear is so you're starting at this kind of bias detection piece, and like, is there a strategic reason for that, or is it actually that is the lowest hanging fruit at the moment? What kind of guided that decision?
It's really interesting, Georgia, that you say about we're retrofitting the steering wheel. That's one of the reasons we actually wanted to focus on bias detection, is because unlike a lot of companies that look at data drift or trying to integrate ethical frameworks before the AI has been created, we wanted to address the AI already used in industry. We found that particularly, even Google had a 3.8 million settlement because they had a system that was underpaying female workers and creating a gender pay gap. Yeah, exactly. So considering that, we wanted to be able to provide those who are already using AI, so they didn't have to remake the entire car. And a really good way of starting that was bias detection, because you can, in the ways that you don't have to be overly involved within their AI. So that helps from like a data protection perspective for them, also in terms of security and managing that data. The bias detection product, if you like, that we've created at the moment also focuses on doing it in kind of the most efficient and environmental way. We're not processing continuous tons of data, because for us, we wanted to one of the things that actually got in our MVP was measuring the environmentalism aspect, and energy consumption.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's a fascinating piece, isn't it? Like, because like ultimately there's the ethical AI piece of like, is this going to, like you say there, actually give a fair wage if that's the parameters that the AI is being used for? Is it going to detect, like racial bias or whatever? But actually, on the fundamental level, how ethical from a kind of planetary survival perspective is the very burning of whatever energy this AI is using? Like, so that's like, I really love that you haven't missed those foundations.
Yeah, we both have circular economy backgrounds, if you like, integrated into our degree. It's part of the reason we did the Exeter and Cornwall, I think, well, at least for myself. And I think because of that, we've come from a very interesting starting point in the fact that we're aware of that social sustainability, we're aware of the environmental sustainability surrounding these new technologies, because it was integrated not in one module but throughout the education, in higher education. And I think that informs the way that you go about creating a product in a company like this. And it definitely informed the more social diversity, neurodiversity aspect as well of Good Robot.
Do you know what? I think that's a really interesting point to tie those two together. So you asked why bias detection, and Elizabeth there is explaining a little bit about our background. So yeah, we did a business degree, Elizabeth and I, that's how we met actually.
Okay.
But this business degree was really prided itself on the fact it had sustainability, like a responsible capitalism sort of woven throughout it, right? So why bias detection? It's because it's actually from a commercial perspective, we can really clearly draw a line between bias detection, the services we're offering, and the company's bottom line, the efficiency, the brand reputation, the legal risk mitigation, while making this thing more ethical. Bias is only one very small part of the whole ethical picture. But I think it really comes from our degree, actually. Business and responsible capitalism. And that is actually what this bias detection is. Commercially, we can prove to you very, very easily, like numbers to the pound kind of thing, how much money that how much value we're delivering to companies. But at the same time, it's still we're delivering a service that is responsible, and it is improving the social sustainability of sort of cutting edge technology.
That's when I hear you say that, like, I'm excited for you, because until fairly recently, until almost like there was a groundswell of human species pressure upon companies to act more sustainably, it was kind of like we'll get to that sort of thing. We'll get to that when we've solved our profitability problems. Whereas now it is becoming a profitability problem not to solve it, right? So I really like the fact that actually here you're coming in the front door with look, this is going to hit your bottom line and it's going to be good for everything else. So there's it's for you as a growing company, you're not going to have to fight that kind of like, okay, well, can we afford to actually do this? Like there's going to be that measurability there. So that's, I wanted to chat to you both because of the kind of the way that you've been, and I kind of worded it in my blurb to launch this episode, leveraging the neurodiversity of your team rather than accommodating for it, right? But I now hear, and for me, that's cutting edge. For me, that is, again, that's the direction that companies are going to have to travel in, right? So it's super exciting that not only are you cutting edge in the kind of ethical AI space, you're also cutting edge in how you operate as a company. But to now hear that you weave in this circular economics piece as well, like companies out there, by the way, like these are your leaders in terms of how we need to operate, right? So I'm really, I am thrilled to be able to give you the tiniest platform possible to actually bring what you do to the world, because you've got this trinity of things that are mission critical. So do you want to speak a bit to that? Like you've given some voice to the circular economics piece. I'd love to hear a bit about how you've approached the neurodiversity aspect as well.
Yeah. So, do you know what? I think I'm going to let Elizabeth speak on this because I think it will be interesting to see which she says. We speak about it quite openly. Organizations don't tackle the subject of how they want to build in these sort of capabilities into the organizations. Organizations, I think we've spoken about it before. I think they're still very much based on the Victorian model. You're clocking 9 to 5, and it's like actually. Apart from not really working for neurodiverse people or a majority of other groups, actually barely works for that sort of neurotypical. It's just a terrible system all around. So we're really trying to innovate how we want organizations of the future to be built, and as that happens, that has a real element for neurodiverse individuals in the organizations. But go on, Elizabeth.
Well, I think when our experience of organizations and neurodiversity, there's often like sort of a spectrum between exclusion to like belonging in a lot of organizations, and many organizations like to some organization have like a rhetoric, and then you go into the organization, you find that actually they need to make a bit more accommodations in order to live up to that rhetoric. And then some organizations have like the tolerance or an acceptance. And I think in Good Robot, our pinnacle approach to this was belonging. Like we want diverse individuals to feel like they don't have to be accommodations because they already accepted, they already belong. And I think as someone who has autism myself, like I really quite struggled with that transition going into the workplace. And I think Finn and I have sort of developed a lot of little systems in our organization that have just organically become, rather than stuff that is very like stringent. For example, as you can see right now, I'm working at home. Sometimes if we have a very like social week, it's a lot easier for me to come and retreat in a very like non-stimulating setting while I sort of recuperate and recharge my batteries. I think by showing an example of how that works at like top level, being a co-founder, that has stemmed down through, being really like inclusive and opening that dialogue with our employees, with our stakeholders. Organizations will often see that, we obviously support the sunflower lanyards as well. And I think that all sets that communication and just it's culture, really. It sets a culture up for that belonging.
What a great word that I wasn't expecting you guys to use, belonging. Because I, like in my previous episode on Tuesday, I spoke with a dear friend of mine who's like had 26 years in the field of kind of leadership development and in kind of training and developing learning pathways for leaders. And out of that, like, we were speaking for about an hour. We distilled like 3 really core pieces, right? And I put the kind of acronym of CAPS onto it, like, so care. As a leader, do you deeply care about the people within your organization, right? Not like, because I need to care about them so I can get the best out of them. No, like, do you genuinely care about them? Are you able to show up as your most authentic self? Is the next piece. And the thing that then ties those two together, like your capacity to care and being your most authentic self, is how well you create psychological safety, aka the way of being able to feel like you belong, right? Actually, you're okay, like I'm here in this company and I don't have any low-level stresses triggering me all the time because I feel like I belong, I can be myself, and I know I'm cared for, and there's psychological safety that I can lean on, that I can lean into if I need to. So I am super stoked, like, just to see for me, like, the thread of that initial conversation weaving into what we're speaking about here like, is amazing. So I'd love to get into, there's probably a load of ways we could go, but I'm really curious to know how this organic development of protocols has unfolded, because for me, my curiosity at the moment is there a framework that could be built out? If I speak to enough folk like yourself who've developed these organic protocols, will there be enough overlap between them to say, actually, listen, big companies or whatever, here are some frameworks you need to adopt? So I can see Liz is like popping off. Go for it.
Web of compassion is one that we've talked about a lot
Okay.
in
Speak about that.
Good Robot. Yeah, so I'm love systems thinking. I'm a big systems thinking enthusiast, and I think as you said there, George, about the low level stresses. If you're, a system or working within a system workplace, then those level stresses, they ripple throughout that system.
Yeah.
And I think if you have lots of different strands originating from leadership to sort of how you go about that work and what that work is, and also communication, a big thing within that systems thinking approach is, how are communications made? Are there microaggressions in the way that stereotypes are perhaps made? And, how do you break down that as well when you're growing that team? Because one of the hardest things is retaining that culture as you grow and making sure that as you grow, that culture of belonging really stays and, just only gets better. So I'd love to hear Finn's continuation to
so one of the things that I was really, really fascinated in, still am, is all about emotional intelligence, right? I think it's without a doubt one of almost the only skill that really matters with leaders, because it comes back to everything that you were saying, how you build your organization, how individuals in that organization work, how you understand your competitors, suppliers, key partners, customers. It's so much of it comes down to the emotional quotient you have as a leader. And I think actually, apart from just that, I think you can actually start building that in an organization, and it should be something you're really looking at. So it's all well and good. Elizabeth and I, now we're building out a team, right? So we've got some developers who are great. We've got a first intern, Katie, so fantastic. But people are coming in now, and it's not just us working together on our own values. We've got to start instilling this in the organization. So we're really looking at trying to create, like we've talked about belonging. It is kind of that understanding that we are all individuals. An organization is a collection of individuals, and I think that gets forgotten. Famously at a corporate level, it gets forgotten. I worked in corporate sales for 4 years, and I saw people who are incredibly talented come in, and they're just forced to work in the service line that they work in because they've got the experience, where I'm like, actually, I'm looking at them as like, if I was like your like line manager, I would be like saying, you would be an excellent surveyor. Why the hell are you here? Why are you doing this? And it's all about looking at the individuals, being like, everyone talks about it. People are your most valuable asset, but you can't put it on a balance sheet. So leadership really quickly forgets that is the case. Like, look at the people, look at the individuals, and be like, what works best for them, and don't sort of force them through whatever system you kind of want them to as a company, right? As a corporation, as an industry. So we're really trying to build up, I think, this emotional quotient within the organization, so people do understand each other, understand people are individuals. We are all different, and we're all good at really some things, and we're bad at other things. That's just people. That's great. So I think it's really about that sense of belonging and that is kind of the first thing. If you can if we can cultivate a culture where people are relaxed to be themselves, like you can go in and Elizabeth can come in and talk about whatever thing interests her, and I'm going to be like, yeah, that's cool, man. Not maybe because I'm not particularly interested, because I'm excited that you're passionate about it. And I'm like, yes, come on, let's do this. And that is very much the sort of thing. I'll come in and I'll start talking about something that I've done on the weekend. I'll be like this, or I'll be like, we started geeking out about certain things. Elizabeth and I are kind of nerdy, and maybe unsurprisingly considering it this sort of thing. And we have these really niche passions. Sometimes we go in and be like, are we talking about some grand strategy thing that I saw, and I was like, yeah, it's really exciting. Elizabeth's like, yeah, this is awesome. And I can see Elizabeth's not interested in specifically what I'm saying, but she's interested in the fact that I'm passionate, I'm different. And I think it's kind of creating that kind of culture where it's not just inclusive of that classic corporate inclusive of whatever. No, it's enthusiastic. Go be different. Go do something. Just be passionate.
And as you say that, what I hear is actually that caring about. It's care. You're not necessarily excited about the thing. You're excited about the fact that Liz or you are excited about the thing, and so that's on some level, there is a care there. You're like, actually, I am. Well, it even goes so far as to say you are. It's a way of showing love. You're genuinely it's. And when we talk about this, some of the kind of best relationships are where you are so committed to the other person being happy and joyful. Right, and that therefore brings you alive within the relationship, and that what I hear is that doesn't need to stop in the realm of romantic relationships. You can bring it here into how
definitely.
You form a culture where what I hear is that you're celebrating the joy and excitement of each other. And what a wonderful, what a wonderful culture to be a part of. No, that's awesome. So, in terms of, because what I'm as I kind of hear you speaking, what I'm hearing is that when the accommodations are done well, it helps with like to leverage the neuro differences, right? So what are some accommodations that you use, like, and I'm asking as like I'm trying to geek out myself as someone who got the diagnosis like a month ago, and I'm like, what does this mean for my life? Like, there is a re-authoring of my life story happening right here, right now. So I'm genuinely fascinated to know what are some of those accommodations that have worked for you, and how do you kind of develop them? How do you, like, not enforce them, because that's totally the wrong word, but how do you kind of keep them rolling? Encourage, how do you implement, maybe a better word?
Okay, so I think the first thing we do, and this is something we do with other colleagues as well, is we reach out and we first ask, what makes you excited about working here, and what do you enjoy, and what do you find difficult? And there is a kind of a level there of, as Finn related to, emotional intelligence. And one of the accommodations that Finn and I sort of made, I guess, in this organic system is I really struggle to know when to talk in meetings. I don't really, especially online, it's quite difficult to understand the social cues, and it's very difficult for me to sort of clog how long I've been talking without actually looking at almost like a timer and being like, oh, okay, I need to wrap this up in a minute.
I feel it. Yeah,
sorry. And also, I can be for a company which has, quite a lot of IP, as someone who sort of struggles to know where the boundaries of that IP is, and to go, oh yes, cannot communicate about that as much as I'm excited about it, because it's really important to obviously retain that within the company. For me, Finn and I had to sort of have a hands-on system. So the hands-on system is, when I would like to say something, I'll put just a hand on the desk. This obviously is quite a quirky accommodation, but it's a great example of something that organizations might not have. If they have like a list in accordance with the Equality Act, they can make accommodations. And this is the key thing, that isn't always in the interest of the individual. That's in the Equalities Act. And I wrote a paper on this recently, because Finn and I were discussing what accommodations we can have that actually make kind of impact, but something that can inspire people as well to come up with their own accommodations and things that will make their lives better in the workplace. One of that is having, for example, a mentor, a buddy, someone who isn't your line manager, and also having like an open space to put forward ideas. We call it like feed-in inclusivity, where if someone feels like there's something that could be added, or perhaps if we had a larger team, maybe a social group for those struggling with ADHD or those struggling with autism, to then create sort of that support web. And also not predefining as well what growth and success should look like. I think in some organizations, there is very much like key metrics, have to go to X amount of meetings. Some people might work really well independently. Some people also might need a bit more support when it comes to syncing up with the team. We tend to have sync ups each morning. So each morning we'll have like a really quick 15-minute, very structured, like, this is what I'm going to work on today. This is what I'm doing. Because it excites you. It empowers you and energizes you. But alternatively, if someone found that they wanted text communication, or they found audio and visual very difficult, then, we can adapt to that. And we often use Miro as a great way to organize ideas for this. And I think finding those technologies to support that kind of compassionate leadership is really crucial for supporting the overall accommodations.
Can you just say a bit more? I'm not sure I fully clocked it. So, and it seemed like something super fascinating, where you were saying about some organizations will create accommodations that aren't necessarily in the best interest of the individual. I didn't quite get that, but it feels like there's something massive there.
Yeah. So I recently I did this essay for a summer course on SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and policy and how policy goes into that. One of those, of course, is inclusive employment. And leading on to that, I looked at the Equality Act, and it's quite shocking, actually, how vague these accommodations have to be. But there's particular lawsuits recently on the fact that accommodations do not have to be made in the interest of that person. Yeah, that sounds strange, but as long as the organization is aware of the diagnosis and has made effort to make accommodations, if those accommodations then do not work, they're technically not liable. There is such a thing, though, if those accommodations enable discrimination or create additional discrimination, then it's an issue for the organization. But if there are accommodations that simply do not help the individual, then there is nothing to sort of protect that individual employment. Which is why we have I know, right? So we have a really collaborative dialogue.
I want to swear really loudly, but like, why on earth would you do that? Like, it's the antithesis of care, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you literally go, how can we tick this accommodation box so we're legally covered, but we're not actually giving a shat about the person?
Yeah,
right?
But
I think a lot of it comes to communication understanding, though. Sorry, Finn, do you want to?
But it is a box. I mean, that's exactly right. Like, these organizations aren't approaching like inclusivity in a like the way we're approaching it. We're approaching it as in, like, this is great, this is what a great way to get like an amazing organization with loads of skills and diverse talents. We're approaching, they're not, they are approaching this as purely like a box ticking, covering our asses, let's not get sued kind of a like strategy. That's the thing. I mean, trying to create a like, right, if you have this diagnosis, these are the accommodations we can give you, is insane. And also, like, it shouldn't be down to just your, like, it shouldn't, I'm a strong believer that it shouldn't just be down to your, like, a diagnosis for whatever. Everyone is different. Everyone can be very, very different, and you make accommodations for whatever is going on in someone's life. Like, it shouldn't matter if they come to you with this diagnosis or not. If they're saying, I struggle with this, then you go, okay, we're going to figure out a way that you don't have to do that as much. That's great. And leverage what you're good at. And that, I think, is what organizations are missing, because when you don't, if you apply accommodations to just one group of people, then it becomes a worse accommodation for those sort of group of people, and it becomes a source of friction between the people who don't have accommodations. Like, everyone is different, everyone has their own things going on, everyone has a right to some sort of accommodation. Like, if there's some people just don't like certain things, and that's okay, because they're whatever they're like, don't like, whatever they're not comfortable with, or they're not good at, there is something else that they're going to absolutely excel at, and you just got to find that thing and make sure that they can do that as much as they want, and really like be like grow in that space. That's my sort of thoughts on accommodations, really.
It really feels like a kind of, we are potentially at a bifurcation point between two narratives, right? That the examples you gave there of these, like, let's tick this box of accommodation so we don't get sued kind of thing, is like, essentially, if we actually take a step inside the mind of the people making that decision, it's like some version of, oh, well, we couldn't find a neurotypical person to do this job, so we had to go with this like neurodiverse person. What an inconvenience! How can we minimize this inconvenience and not get sued? Basically, like, what a limited way of thinking. And essentially, what a way to put yourself out of business in about 5 years' time. Let's be very honest, right? Because for me, like, you've probably come across this quote by Einstein. I don't know if he actually said it, but like, the problems we face today cannot be solved by the same level of thinking that created them, right? So as a species, I don't have enough fingers and hands and toes to number the potentially world-ending crises that we face because of the thinking that got us here, right? And there, in the neurodivergent folks, we've got like a vast and growing human resource of people who literally are hardwired to not think at the same level of thinking as created the problems we're facing, right? So we have like a vast problem-solving, like, human resource, like, just insane. And yet we are looking at how we don't get sued rather than going, how do we unlock that? Like,
right. And I think there is another narrative perhaps as well, where organizations do want to make, they do want to encourage diverse talent, but they also don't understand how to do that. They don't have that education, they don't have the training and knowledge, because there is, as Finn said, it's not just on diagnosis. When you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, and it's that's just in my case, but everyone is individuals. And I think when you consider accommodations, then when people don't sort of understand perhaps encompassing picture of it all, or then they tend to go, well, how do I Google, like, how to be more diverse company? Oh, we'll just do those things on there.
Yeah.
So there's an education side to all of this that is sort of needs to be a bit more developed.
I think, you know what, in a lot of ways we get quite jealous of big companies, to be honest, because they've got like so many big resources, specifically the amount of people and talent and skills they've got, especially in the tech sphere, right? Companies will acquire like the FANG companies, the Facebook, Meta, Google, Netflix. They will literally acquire companies just to get their talent, right? We're really lucky. We've got some like super advanced PhD holders in our team, and we're really lucky to get them. But that war for talent in tech sphere, especially this sort of really cutting edge kind of tech that we're working on, is like vicious. It's really hard. So we're really jealous of these big companies. But actually, we've got to remember that because we're a small company, and I think startups need to remember that as well, they have the flexibility, the agility to create the culture from the off, right?
Yes. So
what Elizabeth is talking about there, that narrative of these big companies might want to sort of include it, like build in inclusivity, but just can't do it. Maybe we've got the benefit that we are building this from day one. This is the culture that we're building. So I think we've got maybe that kind of advantage there, that people can come into our organization at any level from day one throughout our entire company history, albeit not that long at the moment, but they can come in and they can be like, hey, this, I'm not very good at this, I don't really know, but I really love this, and I've got this, whatever, and we're like, yeah, cool, let's do it. Let's work with that. And that is just totally within our culture. We've never had this 9 to 5, why aren't you wearing a suit, your tie's a bit off, kind of, oh, you're leaving it like 1:45, like part-timer, kind of that whole culture, which I've been a part of. I was like working 6 years in this sort of these sort of cultures. So I think that's the benefit that we have as a smaller organization.
As you share that, the kind of image that springs to mind is that these vast companies, they have huge resources, but essentially they can only deploy them to manage an existing forest, right? That's got quite well established. Whereas you are able to plant each of these saplings that's going to cultivate this incredible forest, but you can tend to the soil conditions for each of those trees uniquely as the forest develops and grows. And so ultimately, when it is a full-grown forest, its strength, its roots are going to be deeper, its canopy and foliage is going to be broader and more beautiful, right?
I love that metaphor.
I love that metaphor as well. Yeah,
I was going to say everything we've learned from culture is, it's incredibly difficult to change, the unspoken culture of an organization, right? And that is so much like when trying to increase like the heterogeneous genes in an actual forest. So
by the way, I've got to just say, before I forget it, I love the image when Elizabeth, you were talking about sometimes you just get in your flow and you might be revealing things that you perhaps shouldn't be revealing. I kind of had the image of like Finn like slow motion running for the NDA button, like no.
We had it quite recently, didn't we? Like Elizabeth talking. Yeah, sometimes the strategies aren't fully well developed yet. But
I'll look to Finn and I'm like, can we? And I went for the.
You're going to be developing a whole series of like really nuanced, eyebrow raises and kind of mouth movements to just like. But Jenny, I wanted to kind of just pick that up to so you've got the kind of hand on the table as a way of kind of like saying I want to say something, but like I'm okay to not dive in or whatever, and potentially even actually having literally a clock that you watch, and I've been there 100%, right? What are some other things that have kind of developed in terms of how you like the combinations that Liz are working for you to actually like bring your A game, as much of the time as possible?
Flexible working, but also in a flexible environment too.
Okay.
And like stimming is a crucial regulatory, like emotional regulatory thing that I have to do sometimes. Stimming. So like stimming, it can be like this or like this, and at times it's come across quite a difficult way in previous organizations I've been. To previous managers, they have called it childish in the past, even though it's something that for me I have to do to physically regulate my body. And I think it's not something that's often like talked about a lot in society, let alone organizations, because it can come across as quite strange. But like in our organization, at least, you know, I feel quite happy to just stim when I need to.
Right.
So I wouldn't necessarily call that accommodation. It's just sort of something that I feel I have that security, that psychological security, and I feel like it's okay to do that. Another thing is our actual organizational like setting. So we fully support people just working remote from day one. I think that's really crucial. And also in our office environment, if we had like a full kind of office and we're really, you know, had the resources to do that, definitely having a quiet room or a space for people to chill out is one. I think is as well having the Miro boards are great for collaboration, especially since it allows for a variety of communications to happen and people can communicate all at once. If you have lots of ideas and you struggle keeping track of those ideas, really useful tool to just put down all the ideas, and then we can go back and like do a round of summary later. I'm sure Finn can think of a lot more.
Well, actually, I mean, this is the thing. So I was thinking then is like, right, what specific strategies do you have? And I was thinking, you know, a lot of those you said. Actually, I don't think it's down. I think with what you're asking, I don't think it's down to the specific strategies because they will always be so different. Like the Miro board actually was not something we'd used before. We'd not needed it until we had someone join our team who was like, audio visuals, like, not a good thing for me. So we're like, okay, fine. So we like innovated a new strategy. We're like, right, we're going to work with this. So then we started working, and actually that's just now works in the organization. Like a lot of people seem to prefer it, right? I think it's actually down to, if you get that culture of like whole inclusivity, like, you know, it's just down to having an innovative organization, right? Like every little strategy will just be innovated from that culture you've got of like understanding people, and you will then end up developing so many specific strategies. Like that hand thing is like the hands on this, like it's something we like to refer to because people are like, oh, that's cool, like that's a specific thing. People can really understand that. It's like that is how we communicate in a subtle way around like, whatever. But actually it's not that. With someone else who had autism, that could be a complete waste of time. You don't know, right? So like everyone is like individual, so you just innovate your strategies around it. I mean, what is it like? Jack Welch, big like American industrialist, he's like famous like if you're not innovating, your company's dying, like a classic American like. But it is true, you've got to be like at every level you need to be able to think about whenever you encounter a problem, everyone in your organization should have that ability to like think and like innovate some kind of solution to it. And that is what we do. Like a day in, day out, we find like if someone's got some type of accommodation they need, we think you just innovate a way around it that fits in with the organization, fits in with the organization goals, and fits with the person. Most important, right?
So I really like that. It's actually, perhaps here was me thinking it's like perhaps there could be some like commonalities of tactics. But actually, it's what I'm hearing is like, and practices it like a common, but it's less about the practices and more about the principles.
Yeah,
because the practices are going to be what's what I'm looking for, deduced from the principles. So it's like, and in one of the previous episodes, I was exploring a kind of framework of how you support flourishing communities and teams, and there's a kind of line from like purpose. So what is purpose? And part of the purpose I'm hearing for you guys is like constant innovation, right? Then from that purpose, you derive some principles, some operating principles. And from those principles, then you will have some practices that allow you to get what needs to get done, right? So, I'm hearing that perhaps it's less about, here was me thinking it's about the practices. Actually, that's the thin end of the wedge. It's more the purpose and the principles that are going to guide what those practices might be. And the practices could change, at the drop of a hat, right? But the principles are probably what's going to guide this culture of belonging and care and feeling like you are supported, right?
I find even the like sections as well that go into those principles of overlap quite a lot as well. So if you look at like the training, the support system in place based off of those principles, based off of that kind of principle framework, even stuff like recruitment, all that is, if you ask a company what their recruitment practices, there's probably like a couple of common practices. Oh, we receive CVs, we go through CVs, but the way the principles inform the method of doing that. Like for us, for example, If we had a like recruitment CV system, we're not quite big enough for that yet. But one thing would be anonymizing the names and genders to look at the experience and the like having one approach that way.
Nice.
I think do you know what? I think business has known this for a long time, right? Like strategy has been like a study for a long time. And this whole like exactly what you're talking about, principles, that like longer term stuff with the practices. I think it comes back down to that. Your strategy is your long term. That's hard to change. Your strategy is those principles in place, right? And we've been doing this with like marketing and like finance for ages.
Yeah.
And now I think we're really applying those sort of that idea to this inclusivity narrative, which is like you have your like principles, you have your top level thing that doesn't really change, but every day those tactics, those like little practices, they're going to change every day, and it's always going to be like something, you're always going to get something new, and it's always going to change around those like around whatever the situation is. So I think when you're approaching this subject, and I think Elizabeth will agree with me here, is that you can't be like the exact problem we've got at the moment is people have like found a load of practices, like they've got a structure and they're like, these are the practices, this will make you inclusive. It's like, that's like the wrong way of, Lisbeth's had enough. That's the wrong way of approaching it. Actually, you build a culture, some principles, and then those sort of practices will develop organically around the people you've got.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that's sorry. And off of what Finn said there, that's why I think accommodations happen that aren't in the interest of those individuals, because of precisely that.
Yes, like they're married to the practices, not the principles.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Really nice. So I want to respect your time, not least because Finn's got to create a presentation to give shortly, right? But I wonder, in this conversation we've had so far, we've explored where you want to be headed as a company and why that's so mission critical for the human species. We've also then explored how you want to do that as a company and why that's so mission critical for the future of work, right? Do you feel, either of you, that there's anything that we perhaps haven't touched on that's really key to either of those elements that that we need to kind of make sure gets brought out?
Oh man, I mean, you could. So I think one of the things we're really working on is like so I think one of the things I wish we could go into it, but I think it'll be in like another hour long discussion. Cool, right. I think we're not even there yet, but we're a company that's focused on like ethicality,
right?
Like as almost we're commodifying ethicality,
okay.
And that in itself is like such a problem. Like that can't be a thing. How can you commodify ethicality? Will it just be your company's ethics? Yes. Will it just be your client's ethics? Like this whole thing of ethicality, we've said it so many times. What does your company do? Ethical AI. People are like, great, that's going to fit exactly my ethical framework. And you're like, hey, it probably won't fit my ethical framework. It probably won't fit. It's like the hardest thing in the world. This whole concept of ethics, I think people don't understand it because there are very few people in business that have like philosophy training. There are very few people in like high tech that have philosophy training. That's just, those aren't combinations that happen that often. And actually that is, I think, something we're really focusing on that is absolutely mission critical for not just us as an organization, and not even just the technology area we're focusing on. Artificial intelligence actually is going to be increasingly a thing that big organizations have to face, and they are facing it. Like we've got Google and Facebook. The whole idea of ethicality for these big tech companies, or big companies full stop, is increasingly coming to the surface, and I think that's something that we're really increasingly focusing on. What is ethicality? What does it mean to, like, how does it work with our organization, with our products, with our technologies, with our people? I think that's going to be the next big thing that we're going to tackle. So we'll have to talk about it more in person at that point.
You're right, because as you say that, the example that comes up is you say, oh, we do ethical AI, and the other company's like, brilliant, and you think you're both talking about the same thing, but actually I'm reminded of is it the kind of Inuit have 17 different words for snow? You and I have got snow, right? Whereas there could be a whole range of things that are being discussed, and unless you've established what those exact specific terms are, then you could be before you know it, you're miles apart, right? So that is really important, and a growing discussion. Elizabeth, anything for yourself that feels like we haven't quite touched on that we should in the the short time we have remaining for this episode? I think episode 2 is definitely on the cards as well. By the way.
No, I think it was really well covered, actually.
Nice.
Thanks.
All right. Well, listen. So one thing is like, who knows who's going to watch this, right? So and when. So right now, at your phase of growth, what are some things you really need? Whether that's people, whether that's like solutions, like because you just never know. So, like, is there some kind of ninja that you need that you put the call out for the ninja, right?
I would say, oh, is it still? There we go. So I don't know. Maybe Elizabeth could do it from a technical front, and maybe on the business side of things.
Nice.
But I think you're right. We're a startup, and it's great because we've got momentum behind us, and we're getting customers, research partners. Like it's going really quickly. But just like any startup, we're like, resources are tight constantly. Good. We're constantly working around that, so
we want some cash, please.
Cash, but also we're taking on more customers. We need talent and all the same things that the startups want. I mean, we're in the nice position and the rare position and the somewhat terrifying position where we've got loads of momentum. Everything's going at 1 million miles an hour, right? So it's not like one thing we need. Like everything is always we're just taking up all the and we're going with it. So I don't know, if you're a developer, if you're interested in finding out more about this from a research perspective, then you're absolutely welcome to get in touch. We're speaking to a lot of investors already. If you're an investor, get in touch. I don't know what.
If you're an investor, don't miss the opportunity. Like the queue is forming. Like don't be at the back of that queue.
I don't know what Elizabeth would say specifically on a technical side of things.
I would actually reach sort of a more open call than that. In fact, if you're enthusiastic about ethicality, about AI, about like how they interact, even from a business trying to integrate more ethical AI into your AI, or understand how bias works, particularly, get in touch. Same with enthusiasts, developers. Like, you people are out there somewhere.
Nice. So I want to finish up by congratulating you for this momentum. The image I had was this kind of, you've seen those cartoon, like in the cartoons where they start like maybe fighting on a mountain full of snow, and then it just turns into a giant fighting snowball that grows and grows. So my hope is that as you gather this momentum,
Family Guy reference,
possibly, as you build with this momentum, may you not crash and fall hard. May you actually ride the wave, and may people be brought to you who you need, and resources be brought to you as you need, because this is mission critical for our species. Let's kind of return to that. Like I said it slightly hyperbolisly in my opening, but it feels really true that if we get this piece right, potentially what we have is technology that work for and liberate the human species and support the healing of our planet. If we get it wrong, we've seen enough movies to know what that looks like. So thank you for the stand you're taking. And more than that, thank you for how you're taking that stand. As someone who, like, I'm a month into my own diagnosis of like ADHD and probably a sprinkling of autism in there. And I'm still landing. I still don't know what that means for me. But what I do know is when I hear how you guys are operating and this word belonging that, you've enshrined at the heart of your culture, I feel excited about the direction that we are traveling in. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for having us. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Cool.
Thank you so much, George.
Go well. Good luck with your presentation, and I'll look forward to episode 2 as and when. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.